At the time of writing this, the events of this story happened just yesterday. I'm a freshman in high school, and the year is almost over. Towards the end of every school year, I have a night, usually on a Saturday, where I invite some friends over to stay at my house. It's pretty much a tradition at this point. This year, however, only one of my friends could make it. We'll call him Greg. Greg and I have been close friends since the 5th grade, and we both enjoy all things horror-related, listening to stories on YouTube, watching scary movies, etc. I live in an upper-class neighborhood that is usually pretty quiet. The past few times Greg has stayed over, we had nightly strolls around the area and would have heart-to-heart conversations about our lives. Being a young man nowadays can be very confusing sometimes, and it's just nice to have a friend who'll just listen to you vent about whatever happens to be going on in your life. This night was no different. We started our walk around 1:30 a.m. and visited our usual spots around the neighborhood. After about an hour, I came up with a brilliant idea. Hey, you know what? We aren't far from my old house. We should go by there and check it out. It's kind of a long story, but my old house is in the same neighborhood. Since my family moved here when the community was still being built, we moved into one of the first completed houses. However, there were plumbing issues, electric outages, and the garage roof collapsed after 3 months of living there. So my dad worked out a deal with the real estate company to have us moved to the next completed house that was thankfully constructed by a different company. Greg was down for the idea, so we headed in that direction. It took us about 30 minutes to get there. The connecting road was usually bordered by corn stalks on both sides, but since this was the off-season, there was just an open field. As we continued down the road, many memories came flooding back to me. But I was sure Greg did not want to talk about the fuzzy memories from my childhood. So I pushed my nostalgia to the back of my mind and continued talking about relevant topics. After 10 more minutes, we were finally approaching the entrance. At the risk of sounding cliché, the entrance to this part of the neighborhood was much more eerie than I remembered. For some context, the farmland I mentioned is part of our neighborhood, but it also separates the old section from the more developed one. You see, the original company that built my first house also constructed several others that ended up having the same problems. Everyone who lived in those houses was relocated to the part of the community I live in now. There are still a few people living in this section, but there are entire streets of abandoned houses, some of which were never fully completed. As we approached, I got the chills. Something inside was screaming at me to turn back. But I told myself that we would make this quick and then start heading home. As we got closer, I heard something moving around in the nearby forest. I chalked it up to it being a deer or some other animal. That's when we heard a loud, hair-raising scream erupting from the dark. The scream was followed by a low growl. That must have been a coyote, Greg said nervously. Have you lost your mind? That was not a fucking coyote. We decided to get the hell out of there and hauled ass back to the connecting road. Once we got back to the road, we looked back and saw a tall figure standing by the entrance. This thing would have towered over LeBron James. We ran all the way back to the other side. Thankfully, nothing seemed to be following us. We took a moment to catch our breath and calm ourselves down. After a quick breather, we began speed walking back to my house. After about a minute or two, I looked behind us again and saw something in the road, crawling toward us. It clearly was not an animal. It appeared to be a very tall person on all fours. The figure's movements were jarring and unnatural, as if it was struggling to move itself across the pavement. I cannot explain to you adequately enough how terrifying this was to see. I could only assume that whatever this thing was chasing after us. Greg, am I going crazy, or do you see what I see? No, bro. I see it too. We need to get the fuck out of here. My brother is a night owl, and I knew that he would be up. So I pulled out my phone and I told him to come pick us up at the park, which was down the street from us. If he left right after I called him, we should arrive there at the same time. Thankfully, my plan worked. Greg and I piled into the back seat. What the hell is wrong with you guys? Just drive, man. Go! We explained to my brother what happened during the car ride home. Once we got back, we ended up falling asleep around 5 a.m., but I woke up 2 hours later. Nothing in particular had woken me up. I was just restless, thinking about what had happened just a few hours ago, and I couldn't fall back asleep. Greg stayed at my house until around 4 p.m. Once he left, I did some research. It turns out that the old part of the neighborhood was once Native American ground. I believe that we encountered a creature in Native American folklore known as a Skinwalker. Even though I've discovered what it was, I'm still scared shitless. And I don't think I'll be taking walks at night anymore. I recently heard a story on this channel that reminded me of an experience of my own. I grew up in Buffalo, New York, but in 2003, I relocated to Kentucky to attend Kentucky State University. After settling in, I believed I had found the place that I wanted to move to permanently. I think this is important to mention because I had no qualms about pursuing a long-term relationship there, knowing that after graduation, I would start to establish my career and eventually buy a house in the nearby city of Louisville. I started dating a girl after 6 months. I don't want to share her real name, but I'll use the same name I heard in the story that inspired me to share this one, Melissa. It's actually a pretty funny story about how we met. I had to do some research in the library that day. I was reading a magazine while heading there, and I wasn't really paying attention to where I was walking. She was exiting the library, and she wasn't paying attention either. There are these angular steps that you have to walk up to get into the library. So to make a long story short, we collided. And I ended up falling back down the steps with her bear hugging me. We ended up on the ground together, with her looking down at me.
I'm so sorry about that. Are you okay?
Well, getting tackled by a pretty girl wasn't on the to-do list today, but I'm not complaining.
Oh my god, this is so embarrassing.
Well, since you're literally falling over to get to me, how about we go out sometime? I'm Ryan, by the way. Let me interject here and point out that she was still on top of me and had not made any attempt to get up.
I'm Melissa. And absolutely.
At that moment, she became my girlfriend. I had wanted to start up a relationship but never really pursued anything, until it literally crashed right into me. Everything seemed to fall perfectly into place after that. Melissa and I got along great and had similar schedules. Our classes let out around the same time, and we would usually meet up and go get something to eat, and then would walk back to the dorms together. As I said, things were great between the two of us, but after 3 months, red flags began to manifest. I found it odd that, unlike most students, she didn't seem to share her room with anyone else. To be honest, that's less of a red flag and more jealousy on my end. I had to share my room with an antisocial dickhead named Jerry. 3 months into our relationship, she would never allow me to spend the night, and she would get uncharacteristically defensive every time I brought it up. Melissa would not share a whole lot about her past with me. She would be methodically vague and very broad when she would talk about it. She told me that she was originally from Syracuse, New York, but her family moved to Kentucky when she was 7. That was one of the things that we bonded over. We were both from upstate New York. Outside of these oddities, being with Melissa was like a dream come true. But the thing about dreams is that you have to wake up at some point. I couldn't shake this gut feeling that something was off. There had to be a reason that she didn't want me to spend the night at her place. A reason that I might not like finding out about. I began to think that she was involved with another man. Winter break was coming up, and I wanted to get to the bottom of my suspicions. I'm ashamed to admit that I did deceive her a little bit. I told her that I was heading back to Buffalo to spend Christmas with my parents, which was the truth. However, I said that my flight would be leaving the day before it actually was scheduled to. I had her drop me off at the airport, and then I called a taxi to drive me back to campus. I felt bad about lying to her, but I had to know why she didn't want me to spend the night. There was a possibility that I would catch her red-handed with some other guy, and there would be some loud drama in the hallways of the dormitory, but I had no idea what I was in store for that night. Melissa's dorm was located at the end of the hallway on the 3rd floor, directly next to an emergency stairwell that was used for evacuation purposes only. When I first came to her dormitory, I had accidentally taken this staircase instead of the main one. Her apartment door could be seen through the exit door on this stairwell. So, when I got dropped off on campus, I tracked down Melissa and shadowed her, staying at a safe distance with a ball cap and hoodie on, like an obsessed stalker. Truth be told, that is exactly what I was in that moment. Melissa did nothing out of the ordinary for that entire day, and eventually ended up at a study hall that lasted until about 8 p.m. I figured that she was done for the day, so I hurried back to her apartment building and took the emergency staircase so I could go to the landing on the 3rd floor and watch her enter her apartment through the emergency door's side light. As I was waiting there, in the dark, it dawned on me how insane the situation was. I lied to my girlfriend, put on a disguise, and stalked her like a psychopath because I was suspicious of something that may or may not be true. I thought about confessing to her later. Much later. Soon, Melissa emerged from the main stairwell and made her way over to her apartment. She stopped directly outside of her door and just stood there staring straight ahead. Oh God, it gives me goosebumps just writing this. She then slowly turned her head and looked in my direction. I nearly shat myself, but I managed to stay calm. There was no way that she could see me. I had been to her dorm several times before, and there's just no way that you can see into the stairwell from her doorway. It was too dark, and it's not like I was standing right up against it. Melissa just stood there, looking at the door for what felt like ages. What happened next was something straight out of a nightmare. Melissa set her backpack and books down, and then crawled up her door to the ceiling. I swear on my life, that is what I saw. She disappeared from view. I didn't know what the fuck was happening, so I decided to run back down the staircase. As soon as I got to the very bottom, I heard what sounded like Melissa's voice calling out to me. But it was different. It was like there were others with her.
Ryan.
I know most of you might expect me to say something about chills going down my back, but no, I got a sickly feeling in my stomach, and I still do, remembering that awful voice calling out to me. It makes me want to throw up just thinking about it. I ran all the way back to my own dorm, locking it behind me. After 2 hours of pressing my back against the door, I finally calmed down. I decided to change out of my clothes because I was covered in sweat and call it a night. I didn't know what to make of what I had witnessed. I saw my girlfriend climbing up the fucking walls like Spider-Man and heard a strange demonic voice calling out my name. Some people are afraid to sleep because they are prone to nightmares, but in my case, I wanted to fall asleep to escape a nightmare. I just remember putting my blanket over my head and passing out. During my flight the next morning, I remembered that I had told Melissa that I would call her as soon as I got to my parents' house. I was still digesting what I saw the night before, but I figured that I would call her from the airport in Providence before I boarded my connecting flight. I thought about lying to her again about being stuck in the airport all night because of a delayed flight, but I ultimately decided to just confess everything to her. And while I was at it, I would also ask about what the hell I saw. Unfortunately, the call went straight to voicemail.
Hey, this is Melissa. I'm not in right now, but leave your name and number and I'll get back to you when I can. Have a wonderful day.
Hey Melissa, it's Ryan. I'm sorry about not calling you yesterday, but I really need to talk to you. I'm at the airport in Rhode Island right now, but I'll call you again as soon as I get to my parents' place. I'll talk to you soon, I guess. Over the next week, I tried calling her several more times, until finally, I got the automated message informing me that the phone number that I was trying to reach had been disconnected. I think everyone knows how the story is going to end. I never saw or heard from Melissa ever again, and trust me, I turned over every rock trying to track her down. A part of me believed that Melissa had been a figment of my imagination, until I was asked by some friends on campus and even some staff members about where she had gone off to. So I knew that I wasn't losing my mind, but I had no answers for them. This entire ordeal still baffles me. I had just filed it away under the unexplained shit section of my memory. That was until I heard a story on your channel. And to be honest with you, it brought back a lot of unwanted memories. There were way too many similarities to ignore. The physical description matches perfectly. An attractive 5'9" blonde girl with green eyes. The person who submitted that story said it took place in upstate New York. He wasn't specific, but I'm willing to bet it was around the Syracuse area. Something deep down tells me that we both encountered the same thing. I don't know who or what Melissa is, but I would die happy knowing that I'll never see her again. Hey everyone, this is your Uncle Unit. Thank you so much for checking out my video. If you have a story that you would like me to narrate on this channel, please send it to my email, unit522submit@gmail.com. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future content. And if you would like to support this channel even further, you can check out my merch store. There's a link for that in the description. I look forward to hearing from you, and I hope you stay tuned for the next video. Until then, never forget. There's always